A number of years ago, I worked with a Buddhist monk who had an amazing program teaching at-risk youth how to meditate to music. He had a big opportunity to meet with some potential funders and influencers, and he wanted to make the most of it, so he asked me for some advice. He had a lot of important things to say. This program builds character. Kids who go through this program, they'll know the right thing to do. What we're going to teach them is a lifelong skill. That's all great stuff, but I had a feeling he had something more interesting to say. After some discussion, he finally told me this story. One of the kids in the program called Mind the Music, he was a refugee from Rwanda. We'll call him Joey. When Joey was a young child, he and his family survived the genocide in Rwanda. Now, you'll recall that this was a time when people were literally being hacked to death in the streets. People were fleeing from one end of the country to another. It was horribly traumatic, especially for a young child. Eventually, Joey and his family made their way to the United States, and now he's about 13 years old. And Joey has a problem. He gets in fights all the time. Finally, a friend of his said, "Dude, you need some help. Come with me to the youth center to this Mind the Music program." So Joey comes along, and like all the other kids there, he gets to pick whatever music he wants to listen to. Rap music, hip hop, happy lyrics, violent lyrics, anything he wants to listen to, he gets to pick. And as he listens, he learns how to meditate. And after a few months, Joey isn't getting in fights anymore. When asked what happened, this is what he had to say. "Everyone always told me I should just chill out, but nobody ever told me how until I came here." Now imagine that you're a potential funder to this program. Do you want to write your check to the organization that builds character, or to the one that helps kids like Joey not get into fights anymore? That is the power of story. A couple of years later, I heard this monk give some public talks, and I was blown away by how powerful a speaker he was. He turned out to be an amazing storyteller. Now, I don't take credit for this, but what I can tell you is in my work in executive branding and communications coaching, a lot of what I do is I just give people permission to be who they really are, to talk the way they really talk, and to make that most human of connection that comes so powerfully through story. But something weird happens in formal or business situations, and all of that humanity just goes flying out the window. And that's a shame, because story is the most powerful form of communication. It's a leadership skill. And if you're going to be successful, you need to tell stories. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, "I'm not a storyteller. My Aunt Mary, she's the life of the party at Thanksgiving dinner every year. My favorite teachers, my preacher, you should hear that guy. They're great storytellers. Me, not so much." I beg to differ. Who's ever had an experience like this? Let's say you meet someone at a party or a business meeting who you think is rather attractive, and yet your time with them is oh too brief. In subsequent hours and days, you dig around to find out everything you can about them. You ask your friend or colleague who introduced you, "So what do you think of this person?" You Google them, of course, right? And if you're really lucky, you'll score a public Facebook page with tons of photos on it. And little by little, you begin to piece together a narrative of who this person is and what their life is like. Do they like to hike, bike, and run like you do? Are they into comedies, or would they be more like a documentary type? Do they like to cook? Because I could really use a cook. And before you know it, I'm imagining myself coming home to a beautifully prepared meal, snuggling up on the couch with my sweetie for the evening. Is it just me, or has anybody else ever had a thought like this, right? Okay. You are a storyteller. It is one of the most human things that we do. When you're out having coffee with friends or having a beer with friends, you're telling stories. When you're gathered around the family dinner table at the end of the day, you're telling stories. When you're explaining or persuading or imagining, you're telling stories. Except for some reason in business, we stopped telling stories. Now, there's a story out there about you. Is it your story? Or is it someone else's story of you? Something they made up out of bits and pieces of your life. If you think about it, that's kind of like an unauthorized biography. I mean, it might be okay, but is it really the story that you want to tell today? It could be 10 or even 20 years old. You're here to relaunch, to launch out, to get something started, a new chapter. You need to tell the stories of who you are and what you're doing today in order to be successful. Tell us about problems solved, passions ignited, businesses born. And here's why this is important. People love facts and figures, but they remember stories. You might hear a fun factoid at breakfast, and by dinner, gone. Hey, honey, did you know 1 billion people eat Hershey's Kisses every day? Was it a trillion? A trillion? It was a lot. It was a lot, right? By dinner time, 8 hours later, gone. But you can tell me a story that you have known your entire life. And here's another amazing thing that happens when you tell stories. I see this all the time with my clients. You become a really interesting person. Animated, engaging. All the things you want to be when you're trying to connect with someone. I will be working with people who are telling me all sorts of important things. Here are the features and benefits of our product. Here are the important messages the corporate marketing department told me I should say about this. Here are the bullets on my PowerPoint slide. Oh, and then I finally get them to tell me a story. And it is like they went from like being a robot to being a real human being, like walking and talking. And it's like someone flipped a switch and their body came to life. It's amazing. Their body language changes, their voice changes, their face changes, and now we're connecting. I remember the first time this happened to me. I had this experience when I was a speaker. I was asked to come in and give some tips to some international MBA students, and it was not going well. These students spend their day running around, they're on their feet, they're making things happen. They're MBA students and they work in 5-star hotels and fancy restaurants. It is not natural for them to be sitting in a classroom for 4 hours at a time, which is when I met them. So I'm going through my list. Here's a tip, here's a tip, here's a tip, and here they are. They're on the phone, they're on their laptops, they're whispering to their friend. And here's me, here's a tip, here's a tip, here's another tip. And finally, I took a moment to tell a story, to just illustrate one of my points. And it was a completely banal, nothing story about grocery shopping, of all things. And all of a sudden, everyone was like, and I thought, what just happened? What just happened is one of the most natural things we do as human beings. We just enjoy listening to stories. Now, you are going to have a lot of opportunity to work on storytelling some more tomorrow at the breakout sessions. Now, even if you didn't sign up for those, and by the way, I want to say that if they have storytelling on the docket 3 times in a day and a half, that's probably something that we should pay attention to, right? So, but even if you didn't sign up for the breakout sessions tomorrow, you will still have plenty of opportunities just when you're networking with one another to practice your storytelling. A well-told story is like a minute or 2, maybe 3. Okay, it is not the guy who goes on and on and on, or gal, who goes on and on and on and on and monopolizes the conversation. That is not what I'm talking about, okay? A minute or 2 is plenty of time to fit a story into a networking conversation. Tell us about that moment in time when your business was born, when you knew this was the right thing for you. Tell us about a time you made someone's day doing what you do, or someone made yours. Tell us your story so we can remember you, engage with you, and just enjoy being with you. And you'll have a lot more fun too. Now you might be saying, you know what, I hear what you're saying, Lily, but this storytelling, I mean, the way we've been communicating, it works fine for us. We're good. We have a question we ask at my company, Blue Feet. It's on our website, it's on our business cards. Ask yourself this: have you reached your potential, or are you just successful? We need you to do what you do best. There is no one else who does exactly what you do in exactly the way you do it. Stories are how we show that. The world needs what you have to offer, but if you don't tell us what that is, we'll never know. Thank you.